The nightmare always started the same way. Ethan Thorne stood in the canyon again, rifle raised, sweat burning his eyes under the Afghan sun. The rocks rose on both sides like cathedral walls, and his squad leader Rodriguez was saying something, his mouth moving, but Ethan couldn't hear the words over the roaring in his ears. Then the first shot cracked out. Rodriguez went down, then Miller, then Kowalski. The canyon became a killing box, and Ethan was running, dragging Martinez by his vest, but Martinez was already gone, his eyes empty and staring at nothing. The ground beneath Ethan's boots turned liquid, became blood, became sand, became snow. He woke gasping. The shepherd's hut materialized around him in the pre-dawn darkness. Wood walls, not rock. Montana, not Afghanistan. 5 years gone, but the dead still waited in his sleep. Ethan sat up on the narrow cot, running both hands through hair that needed cutting. 30 years old. 5 years since the discharge. 5 years of self-imposed exile in these mountains, tending sheep that didn't care about the ghosts he carried. He checked his watch, 0500 hours. Old habits. Outside, wind howled through the peaks. The barometer on the wall showed pressure dropping fast. Storm coming 3 days ahead of schedule. His weather prediction had been wrong. The mountains didn't care about predictions. Ethan dressed in the dark, layering wool and canvas against the cold. His hands moved through the routine with muscle memory, the same way they'd assembled his rifle 1,000 times. Everything had its place. Everything had its purpose. Disorder led to death. He stepped outside into air that bit like broken glass. The world was gray in every direction. Mountains rose like frozen waves, and somewhere in the distance, his 18 sheep grazed the tough grass that somehow survived at this altitude. 4 miles to the nearest town, Greywater. 40 miles to the nearest person who gave a damn whether Ethan Thorne lived or died. He preferred it that way. The sheep knew him by his whistle, a sharp two-note call that carried over wind. They gathered at the sound bells tinkling, breath steaming in the cold. Ethan counted them twice the way he always did. 18. All present, all accounted for. Not like Rodriguez and the others. He shook his head, pushing the thought away. The dead were dead. The living had work to do. By 0800, he'd checked the fence line, reinforced weak posts, cleared snow from the feed shelter. The storm would hit by nightfall. He could feel it in his bones, the way old soldiers felt shrapnel before rain. Ethan spent the afternoon preparing, securing shutters, stacking firewood close to the door, filling water barrels from the creek before it froze solid. The military had taught him to plan for worst case, and worst case in these mountains meant blizzards that could trap you for a week. He was hauling the last load of wood when he heard something that didn't belong. Ethan froze wood cradled in both arms, every sense suddenly alert. There. Again. A sound like metal scraping stone coming from the direction of his old hunting shelter, the abandoned hut he sometimes used when weather caught him on the far side of his grazing land. He set down the wood carefully, silently. Reached for the rifle he kept near the door. Moved toward the sound with the tactical awareness that never quite left him, even 5 years removed from combat. The abandoned hut crouched in a hollow between two ridges. Ethan approached from high ground, using rocks for cover, scanning for movement. The door hung open, swinging slightly in the wind. He saw the tracks first, large, heavier than any human. Drag marks in the snow and something dark staining the white. Blood. Ethan's finger moved to the trigger guard. He breathed slowly, controlling his heartbeat, and pushed the door open with his boot. The orc woman was slumped against the far wall. Ethan's first thought was enemy combatant, 7 feet of mow and green-gray skin, wearing cracked leather armor that had seen serious combat. Her left hand pressed against a wound below her ribs, blood seeping between fingers the size of his wrist. Her right hand gripped a hunting spear, though she clearly lacked the strength to lift it. Her eyes met his. Amber gold, like a wolf's, not pleading, not afraid, just calculating whether she had enough left in her to kill him before he killed her. Ethan should have turned around, should have walked away, should have let nature handle what war and distance had started. Instead, he saw Martinez again, saw Miller, saw Rodriguez bleeding out in Afghan sand while Ethan tried to hold his guts inside with both hands. He lowered the rifle. The orc woman watched him, her breathing shallow and ragged. Warrior's breathing, combat breathing. The kind you used when pain was trying to drag you under, but you refused to go. Ethan set the rifle against the wall deliberately where she could see he was disarming himself. He shrugged off his pack, pulled out the field medical kit he always carried, held up both hands showing empty palms. "I'm going to help," he said. His voice came out rougher than intended. "Don't make me regret it." She stared at him for 3 long heartbeats, then gave a single curt nod. Ethan knelt beside her. Up close, she was even more imposing. Her shoulders were broader than his arms, corded with muscle that made his own look childlike. Scars covered her forearms, old ones gone white against gray-green skin. A warrior's scars. Earned scars. "I need to see the wound," and he said. She moved her hand slowly, watching his face. The cut ran from below her ribs across her obliques. Deep, clean, blade wound. Someone had come at her with intent to kill. Ethan's field medic training took over. Assess, prioritize, treat. The wound was serious but survivable. No arterial spray, no organ damage he could detect. But infection in these conditions would kill her as surely as the blade had tried to. He cleaned it with alcohol from his kit. She hissed once through clenched teeth, but didn't pull away. Tough. He stitched it closed with the same steady hands that had sewn up 3 members of his squad in a sandstorm while taking fire. Covered it with pressure bandages. "You'll live," he said, sitting back on his heels. "Wounds clean. You'll need rest, water, food." "Why?" Her voice was low, rough, with an accent that turned consonants into something harder. "We're enemies." Ethan packed his medical kit. "Because leaving wounded to die isn't who I am. You want to fight me after you heal, that's your choice. But not tonight." He stood, grabbed his pack. "Storm's coming. You can stay here or try to make it down the mountain. Your call." "I stay." "Fine, I'll bring supplies." It took him 2 trips to haul what she'd need: food, water, extra blankets, fire starter. He worked in silence and she watched in silence, 2 professionals who understood that sometimes words were wasted breath. On his final trip, he paused at the door. "Name's Ethan," he said. "Just Ethan." She studied him for a moment. "Mira." He nodded and left. The storm hit 3 hours later. Wind screamed through the peaks, turning the world white. Ethan sat in his main hut, maintaining his rifle by lamplight, trying not to think about the orc woman bleeding in his shelter, trying not to think about why he'd helped her. The answer when it came was simple and terrible. Because Rodriguez would have. Because Miller would have. Because leaving someone to die meant becoming the kind of person who could live with that, and Ethan had enough to live with already. He slept poorly, waking every few hours to feed the fire, to check the shutters, to listen to wind that sounded like screaming if you listened wrong. Morning came gray and bitter. Ethan made the trek to the abandoned hut, fighting through snow that had drifted waist-deep in places. Found Mira sitting up, color better, eyes alert. She'd kept the fire going, rationed the food, stayed alive. Professional. Over the next 3 days, a routine emerged. Ethan would check on her twice daily, bringing supplies, changing bandages. They spoke little. He'd ask about pain levels, infection, signs, mobility. She'd answer in clipped military brevity. They were 2 soldiers in a temporary ceasefire, nothing more. On the 4th day, she was standing when he arrived. On the 5th day, she'd sharpened every blade in the hut. On the 6th day, she helped him haul firewood. "Your wound," Ethan said, watching her lift a load that would have staggered him. "Orcs heal faster than humans." She shrugged. "Useful in war." "Must be." They worked in companionable silence, the kind that exists between people who don't need to fill every moment with noise. Warriors understood silence. Silence kept you alive. That night, wolves came for the sheep. Ethan heard them first, the way you hear danger when you have learned to sleep with one ear open. He grabbed his rifle and was out the door in seconds, running toward the panicked bleeding. 6 wolves circling the flock. Big ones, hungry ones. The kind that had come down from higher elevations because the storm had driven their prey to ground. Ethan raised his rifle, lined up the shot. Movement in his peripheral vision. Mira running from the abandoned hut despite her wound spear in hand, face set in warrior's focus. They didn't discuss tactics. Didn't need to. She moved to flank left, he moved right, and together they drove the wolves back. Ethan dropped 2 with precise shots. Mira's spear took a third through the chest, brutal and efficient. The rest fled into darkness. Afterwards, standing in blood-stained snow, breathing hard, they looked at each other. You're trained, Ethan said. Not a question. Clan warrior, since age 6. Army ranger, since 18. Understanding passed between them, the kind that exists between people who've seen combat, who know what it means to fight and bleed and keep fighting anyway. Thank you, Mira said, for the sheep. Thank you for the backup. She almost smiled. It transformed her face, made her look younger, less like a weapon. That night, for the first time, Ethan invited her to eat at his main hut instead of the abandoned shelter. They sat across the fire eating stew made from dried elk and beans, not talking, but no longer strangers. You have nightmares, Mira said eventually. It wasn't a question. Ethan looked up. You hear me? Thin walls. You call names in your sleep. Rodriguez, Miller, Martinez. He set down his bowl. My squad. Afghanistan. 5 years ago. Ambush in a canyon. I was the only one who made it out. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. He poked the fire with a stick. You have them nightmares. Yeah. Every night. She stared into the flames. Warriors I couldn't save. Battles I couldn't win. Choices that cost lives. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, wind howled. Inside, 2 soldiers who understood the weight of the dead shared space with ghosts. Over the next week, something shifted. Mira started teaching him things. How to read tracks the way orcs did, interpreting disturbed earth and broken vegetation. How to maintain blades at the proper angle for different purposes. Small things. Warrior knowledge passed from professional to professional. Ethan reciprocated, showed her rifle mechanics map, reading terrain analysis. They learned through doing, through demonstration, through the wordless communication of people who spoke the same language of survival. One afternoon, working on fence repairs, their hands brushed, reaching for the same tool. Both froze. The touch lasted less than a second, but something electric passed between them. Ethan pulled back first, focused on the fence with unnecessary intensity. When he glanced up, Mira was studying him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Neither mentioned it. That evening, as she was leaving to return to the abandoned hut, Ethan noticed something he'd missed before. A silver clasp on her braid. Ornate, expensive. Military insignia, he realized. Officer's mark. High rank. That clasp, he said, that's not standard issue. Mira's hand moved to it, automatically protective. Was high rank? Not anymore. How high? High enough that people are looking for me. Ethan processed this. You're not just a warrior. I was many things. Her voice went flat. Now I'm exile. She left before he could ask more questions. 2 days later, Ethan woke to the sound of war horns. He was out of bed instantly, rifle in hand, scanning through the window. Dawn light painted the mountains gold, and coming up the ridge were 5 orc warriors in formation. Battle formation. They wore midnight blue and silver, moved with professional precision, and every one of them was armed for war. Ethan grabbed his coat, moved to the door. Mira was already outside, standing straight despite her healing wound, facing the approaching warriors. The lead warrior was female, older than Mira, covered in scars that told stories of decades in combat. She stopped 10 paces away, eyes moving between Mira and Ethan with something like disgust. War Heir Mira Ironheart, the warrior said, voice carrying like a command. Daughter of Warlord Gareth the Unbroken. We've been searching for 16 days. Ethan felt the world tilt. War Heir. Warlord's daughter. The woman he'd been sheltering, eating with, learning from, wasn't just some exiled warrior. She was orc royalty. The lead warrior's eyes fixed on him. Human. Has she been your prisoner? No. Mira's voice cut through the morning air command in every syllable. A voice Ethan had never heard from her. The human saved my life when my own warriors failed to find me. I owe him Kethril Bond. The lead warrior's expression shifted slightly. Kethril Bond, whatever that meant, clearly carried weight. The warlord demands your return, the warrior said. Drake Stormpeak makes threats. The alliance must proceed. I return when I choose, Mira said. Each word precise as a blade. Not before. Drake grows impatient, War Heir. He'll march on Iron Peak if you don't comply. Your duty requires action. I know my duty, Bryn. Mira's voice could have cut stone. Leave. Report that I live and will return when my wound permits. Bryn's jaw tightened, but she gestured to her warriors. They withdrew, moving back down the mountain in the same tight formation they had arrived in. Silence crashed down. Ethan stood there, rifle still in hand, processing. War Heir, Warlord's daughter. The woman who'd been sleeping in his abandoned shelter, eating his food, teaching him tracking techniques, was the equivalent of an enemy general's only child. Say something, Mira said quietly. War Heir, Ethan said. Warlord's daughter. Whole clan looking for you. Yes. And Drake Stormpeak, the threats. Arranged marriage. Alliance between two largest orc clans. I refused. Chose exile over being traded like ammunition in a supply deal. Ethan turned to face her. So your people face war because you ran. Her eyes flashed. My people face war because Drake can't accept refusal. Because my father treats me like political currency instead of his daughter. Still, you ran. They suffer. Don't you dare. She stepped closer, anger radiating from her. Don't you dare judge choices you don't understand. I understand plenty. Ethan's voice stayed level. I understand orders you can't follow. I understand choosing conscience over command. My squad paid for my choice with their lives. So yeah, I understand. Mira stopped, the anger drained from her face. Your squad, the ambush. Command wanted us to fire on a building, civilians inside, women, kids. I said no, called it off. Ethan looked past her at the mountains. Taliban knew our position from the delay. Hit us 3 hours later. 8 men died because I wouldn't pull a trigger. That wasn't your fault. Those were impossible choices. All choices are impossible in war. He met her eyes. But we make them anyway. Live with them after. They stood in snow and morning light, two soldiers who'd made choices that haunted them. Why didn't you tell me, Ethan asked, about who you were? Because for the first time in my life, someone saw a warrior, not princess, saw a person, not political asset. Mira's voice softened. I didn't want to lose that. Was any of it real? Or was I just convenient shelter? She stepped close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her. Orcs ran hotter than humans. He'd learned that, changing her bandages. Every moment was real, she said. Most real thing in my life. Working beside you, fighting beside you, not performing, not pretending, just being Mira, not war heir, not daughter, just me. Ethan wanted to believe her, wanted it with an intensity that surprised him. You need to go back, he said instead. Your people need you. War is coming. I know, but not yet. She looked at him, amber eyes searching his face. Not until I'm ready. When will you be ready? I don't know. The morning stretched between them, full of things neither said. Finally, Mira turned and walked back toward the abandoned hut. Ethan watched her go, this woman who was so much more than he'd thought, and wondered what the hell he'd gotten himself into. That night, he lay awake staring at the ceiling of his hut. War Heir, the enemy's daughter. A woman worth more as ransom than his entire existence was worth to anyone. But also the woman who'd stood beside him against wolves, who'd shared silence in nightmares, who'd made him feel less alone than he'd felt in 5 years. Outside, wind howled through the peaks. Inside, Ethan Thorne wrestled with the realization that somewhere in the past 2 weeks, fighting and healing and working beside an orc warrior, he'd started to care. And caring, he knew from hard experience, was the fastest way to lose everything. But maybe, just maybe, some things were worth the risk. Even if that thing was 7 feet of orc muscle with a price on her head and a war brewing because she'd chosen freedom over duty. Even if that thing could get him killed. Even if that thing had already gotten under his skin in ways he wasn't ready to examine. The storm outside intensified. Ethan closed his eyes and tried to sleep. Tomorrow would bring its own problems. Tonight, at least, they were both alive. Sometimes for soldiers who'd seen too much death, that had to be enough. The attack came at 0430. Ethan woke to the sound his body had been trained to recognize. Bootsteps. Multiple. Moving with the coordination of men who'd done this before. His hand found the rifle before his eyes were fully open. He was at the window in 3 seconds, scanning the darkness. 7 figures moving up the ridge, torches burning orange against pre-dawn gray. Armed, angry, coming with purpose. Ethan recognized the lead man, Wade Garrett, blacksmith from Greywater. Lost his wife and daughter to an orc raid 12 years back. Carried that grief like a weapon he was always looking for excuse to use. Ethan grabbed his coat, moved to the door. Stepped outside, unarmed but ready. Military bearing. Command presence. The kind that made men hesitate before they did something stupid. Wade stopped 20 paces out. The men behind him spread into a loose semicircle. Hunting formation. They'd done this before, probably to coyotes or wolves. Now they were doing it to a woman. Harboring enemy combatants is treason, Thorn. Wade's voice carried the righteousness of men who believe their pain justifies their actions. Federal crime. We know you got an orc in there. She's wounded civilian under my protection, Ethan said. Level tone, no emotion. Not your concern. The hell it ain't. Wade's face twisted. My wife and daughter died in orc raid. You're spitting on their graves, giving aid and comfort to the enemy. She's not the enemy. She's an injured woman who needed help. She's a goddamn orc. One of the other men raised his rifle. Probably been feeding her intel on our defenses. Probably planning another raid right now. Lower your weapon, Ethan said. Not a request, an order. The command voice he'd used on green privates who didn't know better. Nobody fires unless I do, and I'm not firing. You don't give orders here, Thorn. You're just a washed-up ranger hiding in the mountains. The door to the abandoned hut opened. Mira stepped out into torchlight, and 7 armed men suddenly looked like boys playing at war. She stood 7 feet of coiled violence, wearing her cracked armor, gripping her spear with the casual confidence of someone who'd killed more men than these 7 had years on Earth. Her wound had reopened from the sudden movement. Blood seeped through her bandage, dark against Gray's green skin. She didn't seem to notice. Armed enemy combatant, Wade's voice cracked. See, this is what you're protecting. This is what killed my family. Your family was killed by orcs, Mira said. Her voice carried weight, command. I am orc, but I did not kill your family. I have killed in war, many humans, but not women, not children, never civilians. Like that matters. You're all the same. And are all humans the same? She stepped forward. Wade stepped back. Are you the same as the human soldiers who firebombed my mother's medical camp, who burned healers and wounded together because we were just orcs? Silence. I did not think so, Mira said. But you judge me for actions I did not take, for blood I did not spill, because my skin is wrong color. Don't you preach at me about right and wrong. Wade raised his rifle. This ends now. Ethan moved before conscious thought, stepped between Wade and Mira, unarmed, unarmored, just his body and the conviction that this was a line he wouldn't let anyone cross. Move, Thorn. No. I'll shoot through you if I have to. Then you'll have to. Ethan's voice stayed calm, because I'm not moving. You want to kill an unarmed woman, you do it through me, and you live with that after. Wade's finger tightened on the trigger. His hand shook. Behind Ethan, Mira made a sound, not fear. Frustration. Step aside, Ethan. This is not your fight. The hell it isn't. One of Wade's men broke ranks, rushed forward with a hunting knife, screaming something about vengeance and dead children and orc blood. Mira moved like water. Her spear swept low, took his legs out. He went down hard. She reversed the spear, put the blunt end against his throat. Could have killed him. Didn't. I could end you, she said quietly. Should end you, but that would prove him right. She lifted the spear, looked at Wade. Leave, or next time I show less Kethril. The man on the ground scrambled backward. Wade's rifle wavered. 7 men had come up this mountain looking for easy violence. They'd found a warrior who made them remember what violence actually cost. This isn't over, Wade said. Yes, Mira replied, and it is. They left, retreated down the mountain with their torches and their rifles and their righteous anger. Ethan watched until they disappeared into darkness. Then he turned to Mira. She was breathing hard. Blood soaked through her bandage, spreading dark across her armor. Her hands shook slightly, adrenaline crashing now that the threat had passed. You stood between me and rifles, she said. You could have died. Yeah. Why? Because you stood beside me against wolves. Because soldiers don't abandon each other. Ethan moved closer. Because I've lost too many people already. Not losing you too. Something shifted in her eyes. You care. More than I should. More than makes sense. He reached up, touched her face. Her skin was warm, rough with old scars. You're the enemy's daughter. I'm a washed-up ranger, This is the worst tactical decision I've ever made. For me also. She covered his hand with hers. But perhaps the best decision of my heart. The kiss happened without planning. Desperate. Fierce. Two warriors who denied themselves too long because duty and honor and past pain had built walls they were finally tired of maintaining. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "This can't work," he said. "You have to go back. Your people need you. War is coming." "I know. And I can't come with you. Human and Orc stronghold would be target. They'd use me against you." "I know that too. So what do we do?" "I don't know." Mira pulled back, looked at him with those amber eyes that had seen too much war. "But not yet. Not today. Let me have today." They had 2 days. 2 days of pretending the world outside the mountain didn't exist. 2 days of working together, eating together, sitting by the fire and not talking because words would make it real. On the second night, they heard the war horns again. Bryn returned with 30 warriors. Full battalion. The warlord's direct orders. Mira had to go. Drake's Storm Peak's threats were escalating. The clan was mobilizing. War air was needed. Before she left, Mira took Ethan's hand. "I will find way back," she said. "I swear it on my warrior's honor. Don't make promises you can't keep." "I keep all promises." She mounted the warhorse Bryn had brought. Didn't look back. Warrior discipline. Ethan watched her ride away until she disappeared into the tree line. Then he walked back to his hut and discovered what real loneliness felt like. The winter was brutal, not because of the cold, Ethan had survived worse, but because every morning he woke up setting 2 plates before remembering, because every evening he'd hear a sound and turn expecting to see her. Wade's raid had consequences. Greywater ostracized him. Merchants refused service, called him Orc lover, traitor, sympathizer. Ethan didn't care. He'd been alone before Mira. Could be alone after, but the hut felt haunted by her absence. 8 weeks into winter, a raven came, large black bird with intelligence in its eyes that wasn't quite natural. It carried a scroll tied to its leg. Ethan took it to Greywater to old Professor Aldrich, who'd studied Orc languages before retiring to the mountains. The professor's hands shook slightly as he unrolled the parchment. "It's in formal war cant," Aldrich said. "High dialect. Very official." "What does it say?" Aldrich read, slowly translating. "War postponed. Drake waits. I work on plan. Do not give up hope. Signed M.I." Ethan kept the letter. Read it every night. Proof she'd kept her promise. Proof she remembered. Proof that maybe, just maybe, impossible things could happen. On the first day of winter, 3 months after Myra left, Ethan heard war drums. Not attack drums, ceremonial drums, the kind used for formal processions. He stepped outside and saw them cresting the ridge. 30 Orc warriors in full ceremonial formation, banners flying midnight blue and silver, armor polished until it caught the weak winter sun, spears raised in synchronized precision that spoke of decades drilling together. At their center, mounted on a war horse that could have carried 3 men, was Mira. She wore full war air regalia, ceremonial armor that made her look like something from legend, a cloak of white fur that caught the wind, and on her right hand a signet ring that even from this distance Ethan recognized as a warlord's seal. She dismounted with fluid grace. The warriors formed a circle around them. Witnesses. This was official. Mira spoke in Orcish, formal cadence that Ethan didn't understand but recognized as oath-making. Important. Binding. Bryn stepped forward, translated for Ethan's benefit. "I returned to Iron Peak. Faced my father's wrath. Refused Drake's Storm Peak. He challenged me for right to choose. Ancient law allows combat challenge for inheritance disputes. I fought him. 3 rounds. Bryn's voice carried no emotion, but Ethan heard the story underneath. Heard what 3 rounds meant. First blood, surrender, death. First round I drew blood, cut across his chest. Second round he refused surrender. Fought to exhaustion. I forced submission. Blade to his throat. Made him yield. Third round waved. His pride was broken." Ethan looked at Mira. New scars marked her arms, fresh ones, earned in combat with a warrior who'd wanted to marry her or kill her trying. "War air proved herself," Bryn continued. Drake exiled for dishonoring challenge laws. Alliance dissolved. But bigger problem emerged, Mira said, switching to English. Drake's brother, Thane Storm Peak, seized control of their clan, seized weakness, launched raids on Iron Peak borders. Real war coming, Bryn added grimly. Not political marriage, actual bloodshed. Mira stepped closer to Ethan. Close enough that he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight she carried. I need you, she said. Not romantic, tactical. You were Army Ranger. You know human military thinking, tactics, defenses. Thane will hire human mercenaries. Already has. He is building coalition. So you need a consultant. I need someone who understands both worlds, who can help prevent war between all orcs and all humans. She paused. I need my tactical advisor, and I need my partner. Ethan processed this, analyzed it the way he'd analyzed mission parameters 100 times. The tactical part of his brain laid out the equation. He had unique intelligence value, could potentially prevent wider conflict, but would be seen as traitor by humans, target by orcs. High risk, probable death. Would Rodriguez want him to sit this out or stand up? The answer was obvious. What exactly are you asking? Asking you to come to Iron Peak as my tactical advisor. Mira's formality cracked slightly. And asking you to marry me. By orc law, bonded mate cannot be harmed by clan. You would have legal protection. And unofficially, I am asking the man I love to walk into danger beside me, to face hatred from both our peoples, to build something impossible together. Ethan looked at the warriors watching, at Bryn's scarred face, at the mountains that had been his prison and his penance for 5 years. Yes, he said, Mira's breath caught. Yes, Mom. Yes to tactical advisor. Yes to marriage. Yes to impossible. He stepped close enough to take her hand. Been facing hatred for 5 years anyway. At least this time it's for something that matters. She pulled him into an embrace that lifted him off his feet. Didn't care that 30 warriors watched. Didn't care about protocol or propriety. Until death parts us, she whispered against his hair. Or battle takes us together. Together, Ethan agreed. The wedding happened on the ridge, right there in the snow. Ancient rite that Bryn performed with the weight of centuries behind every word. Orc custom required blood. Mira cut her palm with her combat knife. Ethan did the same. They pressed their hands together, blood mingling warm against the cold. Exchange of weapons. Mira gave him an orc combat knife. Ornate, beautiful, deadly, from her father's personal arsenal. Ethan gave her his ranger patch, the one he'd worn through 3 deployments, through the ambush that killed his squad, the only thing he'd kept from his old life besides guilt. This is who I was, he said, who I'll always be somewhere underneath. I give it to you. And I give you this. She held up the knife, symbol of my people, my clan, my blood. We are one family now. The warriors struck their shields. Boom, 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 rhythmic, powerful, sound that echoed off the mountains like thunder. Acceptance, approval, witnessed and binding. They rode down the mountain together. Ethan's small pack of possessions strapped to Mira's warhorse, his hand clasped in hers. Behind them the hut stood empty. 5 years of self-imposed exile ending in a moment. Ahead, a fortress carved into mountains, thousands of orcs who would see him as enemy, and a war brewing that could consume both their peoples. But they rode together, and somehow that made the impossible feel almost possible. The journey took 3 days, hard riding through mountain passes that would have killed Ethan if he'd tried them alone. The warriors moved with efficiency born of decades in this terrain. Ethan watched, learned, adapted. On the 3rd day, they crested a final ridge, and Iron Peak rose before them. Not a fortress, a city, carved into the mountain itself, stone and iron and defensive positions that would make any military planner weep with envy. Walls 30 feet high, gates that could stop battering rams, archer positions covering every approach, home to 12,000 orcs. And Ethan was about to walk through those gates as the war heir's human husband. As they approached, a horn sounded, 3 long blasts. War air returning. The gates opened. They rode through into silence. Every orc in sight stopped what they were doing, stared. At Mira in her ceremonial armor. At the human riding beside her, then the whisper started, like wind through grass. Human. She married human. Disgrace, weakness, shame to Iron Peak. Ethan kept his head up, shoulders back, military bearing, show no weakness, no fear. Myra's hand on his back, steady pressure. Stay close, we walk through this together. Main Street to the keep. Hundreds of orcs on both sides, children pointing, warriors staring with open hostility, old ones shaking their heads. A young warrior couldn't have been more than 20 spat at Ethan's feet. Mira moved like lightning, had him by the throat against a wall before Ethan could blink. He is War Air's bonded mate, she said, voice carrying to everyone watching. Insult him, you insult me. Challenge him, you challenge me. Clear, the young warrior stammered apology. Mira released him, took Ethan's hand again, kept walking. The throne room held 100 warriors, all watching as Mira led Ethan to the center where a massive orc sat on a throne that looked carved from the mountain itself, Gareth the Unbroken. 8 feet of scars and muscle and barely contained violence. The warlord who'd united fractious clans through strength and cunning. Mira's father, his eyes fixed on Ethan like targeting systems locking onto threat. Daughter, Gareth said, his voice sounded like grinding stone. Explain. Father, I present Ethan Thorne, Army Ranger, tactical expert, my chosen mate. Gareth studied Ethan. Long silence. Uncomfortable silence. The kind where you're being evaluated for worth and found potentially wanting. Human, Gareth said finally. You married my daughter. Yes, sir, with respect and honor. Why should I accept this? Why not execute you as spy? Ethan met the warlord's eyes, didn't flinch. Because Thane's Storm Peak is hiring human mercenaries. I know their tactics, their weapons, their thinking. I can help you defend Iron Peak, help prevent broader war. Or you could be feeding intelligence to human forces. Could be, but I'm not. I'm tactical asset. Don't ask you to trust me. Ask you to use me. Garrett's expression didn't change. You have 3 months. Prove your value or face exile. Pause. Heavy. Meaningful. If you betray us, I kill you myself. Either I make you watch my daughter die. Clear. Ethan didn't flinch. Crystal clear, sir. Something like respect flickered in Garrett's eyes. Dismissed. As they left the throne room, Mira leaned close. You did well. He respects courage. He respects results. I better deliver. You will. We will. She squeezed his hand. Together. That night in quarters assigned to them, in the keep, Ethan stood at the window looking out over Iron Peak. Thousands of orcs going about their evening routines, living their lives in this city carved from stone. And somewhere out there, Thane's Storm Peak was planning war. Human mercenaries were gathering. 2 worlds were heading toward collision. Ethan had 3 months to prove he was worth keeping alive. 3 months to help prevent a war. 3 months to build bridges between peoples who'd been killing each other for generations. He'd faced worse odds. Barely. But he'd faced them. Behind him, Mira moved through the room. His wife now, his partner, the woman he'd saved and who'd saved him back. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Opposition. Probably attempts on his life. But tonight they were both alive. Both together. Both committed to something bigger than themselves. For a soldier who'd spent 5 years believing he deserved nothing but penance that felt like grace. Even if that grace came wearing armor and carrying a spear and standing 7 feet of orc muscle and will. Especially then. The formal wedding happened 10 weeks after Ethan arrived at Iron Peak. Not because tradition required waiting, because war required preparation. Thane's Storm Peak's raids had escalated. Supply lines burned. Border settlements evacuated. 3 orc patrols ambushed in 2 weeks. But Gareth insisted. A war heir's marriage was political statement, strategic message, a declaration that Iron Peak stood united human and orc together against any who threatened them. They held it on the mountain peak above the fortress. 2,000 witnesses, both orc and human. Ethan had sent word to Greywater inviting anyone who wanted to come. Most refused, but Professor Aldrich made the journey leaning on a walking stick, saying he wouldn't miss witnessing history. Mira wore ceremonial armor polished until it caught sunlight like mirrors. Her hair was braided with silver thread, intricate patterns that took hours. She looked like something from legend, ancient and powerful and beautiful, in ways that had nothing to do with human standards. Ethan wore formal clothes that Bryn had helped him choose, orc style but tailored to his frame. Midnight blue and silver, Iron Peak colors. He felt ridiculous until he saw Mira's face, and then he felt like maybe he belonged after all. Gareth officiated. The warlord stood before them wearing ceremonial armor that had belonged to his father and his father before that. 3 generations of leadership carved into every plate. "We gather to witness binding," Gareth said. His voice carried across the mountain without amplification. Command voice, the kind that made thousands listen. 2 warriors, 2 worlds, 1 oath. The ceremony followed ancient tradition. Scar sharing. Mira drew her combat knife, cut her palm, deep enough to scar, deep enough to matter. Blood welled dark against gray-green skin. She handed the knife to Ethan. He didn't hesitate. Cut his own palm. Felt the bite of steel, the warmth of blood. Pain was temporary. Honor was forever. They pressed their hands together, blood mingling, warm against mountain cold. "Your pain is mine," Mira said in Orcish. Bryn translated for the human witnesses. "Your strength is mine. Your blood is mine." "Your battles are mine," Ethan replied in English. "Your honor is mine. Your life is mine." Ancient words, binding words, the kind that echoed through generations. Exchange of weapons came next. Mira gave him a war spear, Iron Peak family heirloom. It had belonged to her grandfather, had killed men in defense of the clan, had earned scars in its wood from decades of battle. "This is who we were," she said, "who we will always be. I give it to you." Ethan gave her his ranger knife, the one that had saved his life in Afghanistan, the one he'd carried through 3 deployments. The only physical thing he'd kept from his old life besides ghosts. "This is who I was," he said, "who I'll always be underneath everything. I give it to you. We are one family now." The warriors struck shields. Boom, 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 sound like thunder rolling through mountains. Approval, acceptance, witnessed and binding. Then Gareth stepped forward. The warlord looked at Ethan, and something in his eyes had shifted from the first day they'd met. "I doubted this human," Gareth said to the assembled crowd. "Questioned my daughter's choice. Saw weakness where she saw strength." Pause. Heavy. Meaningful. "I was wrong." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Warlords didn't admit error lightly. Ethan Thorne proved his worth, not through words, through blood, through tactics, through courage when facing hatred from both his people and ours. Gareth turned to Ethan directly. "You are Iron Peak now. You are son I never had. Any who harm you answer to me." He gripped Ethan's shoulder. The kind of grip that could crush bone if applied wrong. "Treat my daughter well or I kill you. But I believe you will." Ethan met the warlord's eyes. "I will, sir. On my honor." "Your honor has proven sound. Welcome to family, Ethan Thorne." The embrace that followed was awkward. Gareth was 8 feet of muscle and scars. Ethan was a foot shorter and half the weight. But the gesture carried meaning that transcended the physical. The celebration lasted 3 days. Orc style, loud, boisterous, competitive. Drinking contests that Ethan lost spectacularly. Arm wrestling that went about as expected. Combat demonstrations that made him grateful he was tactical advisor, not frontline warrior. But storytelling, that Ethan could do. The second night, warriors gathered around fires trading battle stories. Ethan told them about Afghanistan, about mountains not unlike these, about fighting insurgents who knew the terrain, who struck fast and vanished, about tactics that worked and ones that failed, about the ambush that killed his squad. The warriors listened with respect. That transcended species. Warriors recognized warriors regardless of skin color. On the 3rd morning, as the celebration wound down, old Vorik Stoneheart approached Ethan, the elder who'd opposed the marriage most vocally, who'd lost his son to human soldiers 8 years back. "Your squad's stories," Vorik said quietly. "They fought with honor, like orcs would fight." "Warriors are warriors," Ethan replied. "Kin color doesn't change that." Vorik nodded slowly. "You begin to understand. Welcome to Iron Peak, son by choice." 6 months changed everything. Ethan had quarters in the keep now, an office in the war room, mornings training with orc warriors who'd accepted him as much through stubborn persistence as skill, afternoons planning strategy with Mira and the generals, evenings teaching human tactical thinking to select units. His defensive strategies cut Thane's successful raids by 60%. Supply routes stayed secure. Trade resumed. Two small human settlements sent delegations, negotiated treaties. Ethan mediated understanding both languages, both mindsets, both fears. Results earned respect that words never could. Then 7 months after the wedding riders came from Greywater. Wade Garrett led them, the blacksmith who'd come up the mountain with torches and rifles ready to kill Mira. Now he came with warning. The meeting happened in Gareth's private war room. Wade, Ethan, Mira, Gareth, and Bryn. Maps covered the table. Tension thick enough to cut. Thane approached us, Wade said without preamble. Offered gold to raid Iron Peak supply lines. Some in Greywater want to accept. Ethan's jaw tightened. Why are you telling us? Wade looked uncomfortable. Shifted his weight. Because you were right. At your wedding I watched orcs grieve their dead like we do. Celebrate like we do. Love like we do. He met Ethan's eyes. My wife would be ashamed of who I became. You're trying to break the cycle. I want to help. What do you suggest? Mira asked. Joint patrols, human and orc together. Protect trade routes from both ends. Thane attacks either of us, he attacks both of us. Gareth leaned forward. Trust humans to fight beside us after generations of war. Trust isn't given, Ethan said quietly. It's earned. Let's earn it together. Silence. Then Gareth nodded. Trial program. 3 months. First bloodshed and betrayal, the alliance ends. Agreed. Agreed, Wade said. The first joint patrol was disaster. Humans and orcs barely spoke, moved in separate formations, eyed each other like enemy combatants on temporary ceasefire. The second patrol went slightly better. A few words exchanged, shared watch rotations, professional courtesy. The third patrol, everything changed. Thane's raiders hit them hard. 20 warriors, human mercenaries mixed with orc fighters. Ambush in a narrow canyon. Coordinated, professional. Meant to break the alliance before it formed. But when the first arrows flew, something happened that no one expected. Humans and orcs fought together. Not because of orders, because when violence erupts, you protect the person beside you. Species stops mattering when someone's trying to kill you both. A human archer took an arrow meant for Bryn. Orc warrior named Crag pulled a wounded human out of the kill zone, shielding him with his own body. Wade and an orc fighter fought back-to-back, covering each other's blind spots, like they'd trained together for years. They drove off the raiders, took casualties. 3 humans dead, 2 orcs. But they'd held together, bled together. And in blood bonds formed that words never could. That night around the fire, Wade raised a flask. To the ones we lost, human and orc. They died protecting each other. That means something. The orcs raised their own drinks. To warriors, to honor, to new alliances forged in blood. The pattern continued. More joint patrols, more successful defenses, more bonds forming between peoples who'd spent generations killing each other. 9 months after the wedding, scouts brought news. Thane was massing forces, 3,000 warriors, 500 human mercenaries, planning all-out assault on Iron Peak. War Council convened immediately. Gareth's generals argued for preemptive strike. Hit Thane in his camps before he could march. No, Ethan said. Everyone turned to look at him. That's what he wants. He's trying to bait us into bad terrain, into fighting on ground he controls. Then what do we do? Crag demanded. The massive orc general who'd initially opposed Ethan now listened to his tactical assessments. Wait for him to attack our walls. Let him choose the battlefield. We manipulate the battlefield. Ethan moved to the map. Thane needs supply lines from here to here, long, vulnerable, exposed. He traced the route with his finger. We don't hit his army. We hit his supplies. Starve him out. Meanwhile, we invite him to attack our weakest point. We have no weak points, Gareth said. We create one. Show weakness where we're strong. Draw him into kill zone. Mira studied the map. Classic military deception. Show strength where you're weak, weakness where you're strong. Sun Tzu, Ethan confirmed, still works after 3,000 years. They spent a week implementing the strategy. Small mixed units, human and orc together, raiding Thane's supply wagons, burning food stores, poisoning water sources. Not enough to stop him, just enough to make his army hungry, desperate, angry. Meanwhile, Iron Peak's eastern wall underwent visible deterioration. Stones loosened, guards reduced, patrols shortened. To any observer, it looked like neglect, weakness. It was bait. Thane took it. The assault came at dawn, 3,000 warriors screaming battle cries charging the eastern wall. Ladders, siege towers, battering rams, everything committed to one point. They hit prepared positions. Ethan commanded from the war room runners, carrying orders to units positioned throughout the fortress. He didn't fight on the front lines. That wasn't his strength. His strength was seeing the whole battlefield, anticipating moves 3 steps ahead, coordinating defense like chess. Mira led the warriors. That was her strength, 7 feet of fury and tactical brilliance, inspiring troops through personal courage. Together they were devastating. His brain, her blade. The battle lasted 4 hours. Thane's forces threw themselves against walls that seemed weak but held like iron, fell into traps that appeared accidental but were meticulously planned, found themselves surrounded by forces that shouldn't have been there. By noon, Thane's army was broken, surrounded, starving, demoralized. He offered surrender. Gareth wanted execution, orc tradition, remove threat permanently. Ethan stepped forward. Exile him. Make him wander as outcast, living reminder of what happens to oath breakers. Mira supported him. Mercy shows strength. Execution shows fear. Gareth considered. Long silence, then nodded. Exile, stripped of rank and clan, let him live with shame. Thane was led away, live but broken. Sometimes Ethan thought that was worse than death. Victory celebrations that night felt hollow. Ethan stood at the window of their quarters, looking out over Iron Peak. Campfires burning where they'd burned fallen. Both sides, human and orc, together. We won, Mira said behind him. Why the long face? Because people die, Wed, on both sides. Even necessary war is still war. She moved close, wrapped her arms around him from behind. Her head rested on top of his. Height difference that had seemed strange once felt natural now. This is why you're good for me, she said quietly. You remember the kind. Never forget that wars are won by living soldiers but paid for by dead ones. They stood like that for a long time. 2 warriors who understood that victory and loss often wore the same face. 2 years later, the world looked different. Iron Peak Greywater Alliance had formalized. Written treaty. Trade flourishing. Mixed patrols, normal now, human and orc, serving together like it had always been this way. 3 other human settlements signed similar agreements. The model spreading, Montana to Idaho to Wyoming. What had started with 1 soldier and 1 warrior was becoming movement. Ethan had changed too. The haunted look that Rodriguez's ghost had left was gone, replaced by purpose, by peace, by the knowledge that his survival had meaning. He'd finally visited the families, taken Mira with him, told Rodriguez's widow that her husband died with honor, that his last words were about fighting well. Told Martinez's parents their son saved his life 3 times before the end, gave them closure, got some himself. In their quarters now, Ethan kept 2 items on his desk, Rodriguez's dog tags, Mira's silver bear clasp from when they met, both artifacts of past lives, honored, but not lived in anymore. Evening was settling over Iron Peak when Mira came in, moving slower than usual. Her hand rested on her belly, 6 months pregnant, first half-orc, half-human child. Doctors from both species monitoring constantly. Nobody quite sure what to expect. What will you tell our child, she asked, about how we met? Ethan pulled her close carefully. The truth. That war tried to keep us apart, but honor brought us together, that warriors from different worlds can build something better than either world alone. And if they ask if it was worth it, all the struggle, his hand covered hers on her belly, felt the life growing there, legacy made flesh. I'll say this, every scar was worth it, every battle, every moment of doubt, because it led to you, to this, to legacy worth leaving. 5 years after the wedding, Ethan stood in Iron Peak's central courtyard before a memorial he'd designed himself. black stone, names carved deep, his squad, orc warriors who died in Thane's war, human defenders, all together, no separation, just warriors who'd paid the price. Annual ceremony, both peoples gathered, humans and orcs standing side by side honoring dead together. Wade was there with his daughter, the one who'd survived the raid that killed his wife. She stood beside an orc craftsman holding his hand. Their engagement had caused controversy, but less than Ethan and Mira's had. The world was learning. Vorik approached after the ceremony, the elder whose son had died to human soldiers. I visited my son's grave, he said quietly, told him about you, about what you built, about human who helped avenge his death not through more killing, but by ending killing. I hope he'd approve, Ethan said. I think he would. I think he'd be proud. Vorik's hand on Ethan's shoulder, as I am proud to call you clan member. That evening, regional council convened. 12 human settlements, 8 orc clans, vote on permanent alliance, mutual defense, trade, intermarriage rights, integration, debate fierce, close vote, voices raised on both sides. Finally, they called for final statements. Ethan stood. 5 years ago, I was broken man, hiding in mountains, he said, voice steady, carried to every corner of the hall. War had taken everything. I thought I deserved nothing but solitude and suffering. Then an enemy collapsed at my door. I made choice, help her or let her die. That choice led here, to all of you in this room, to possibility of peace. He paused, let the words settle. My squad leader, Rodriguez, his last words were, tell them we fought well. For 5 years, I didn't understand. We lost. They died. What was there to fight well for? Now I understand. He meant fight well for what comes after, for future, for world where their grandchildren don't have to fight same wars. Ethan looked around the room, at faces both human and orc, at the future sitting in these chairs. We've all lost people to conflict, but we honor them by building a world where their sacrifices meant something, where cycles break instead of repeat. Vote yes, not for me, for them, for every warrior who died hoping for better. Silence. Then hands raised, votes counted, 14-6, alliance passed. 10 years after meeting Mira, Ethan stood on the ridge where his shepherd's hut still stood, maintained now as historical site, where peace began, according to the plaque someone had installed. They'd brought their children. 5 of them ages ranging from 8 to 2. Mixed features. Human noses and orc build. Green-tinted skin and human eyes. Beautiful in their uniqueness. Their oldest daughter, Ilara, looked up at him. Were you scared, Papa? When Mama came to your door, Ethan knelt to her level. Verified. But sometimes being brave means doing right thing even when you're scared. Did Uncle Rodriguez teach you that? He did, by dying well, by fighting for something that mattered. They stood on the ridge as sunset painting mountains gold and red. Below the valley showed mixed settlement, human and orc homes side by side, children playing together, markets trading peacefully. What had started with one choice, one moment of mercy over fear, had grown into this. Myra stood beside him, their youngest, on her hip. You did it, she said quietly. You broke the cycle. We did it, together. Together, she agreed. Ethan looked out over the valley, over the legacy they'd built. Rodriguez's last words finally made sense. Fight well. Not for victory. For what victory built. He'd fought well. They all had. And the world they'd left for their children was better than the one they'd inherited. Sometimes that was all any warrior could ask for. The sun set over mountains that had witnessed centuries of conflict. But tonight they witnessed something else. Peace. Hard-won. Fragile. But real. And in that moment, standing on a ridge where everything had changed, Ethan Thorne finally understood what it meant to come home. Not to a place. To a purpose. To a family built by choice rather than blood. To legacy that would outlive him. He'd been a soldier, a shepherd, an exile. Now he was bridge builder, father, husband, proof that impossible things happened when people chose honor over hatred. The mountains stood eternal. The stars came out. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, Ethan could almost hear Rodriguez's voice approving at last. You fought well, brother. You fought well.